Hello YouTube, this is Ben Gessel. Gonna make a few other videos tonight. It's getting close to Christmas. It's by December 22nd, 10:51 p.m. I'm in the high 20s now in terms of my videos, so definitely making some more recently. In this video, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about, and of course I'm a piano teacher. I've been teaching for over 9 years now. It's hard to keep track, but I believe it's right in that ballpark. Not quite 10, but it's getting there. So I'm going to be talking more at length in this video about some of the different behaviors, not necessarily negative, just different behaviors and personality kinds of things, and also different abilities, as well as different kinds of practice habits and patterns amongst children and teens that I've taught. And as I'm going through all these things, I'm sure that a lot of these things will be very familiar to a lot of different teachers, not just piano, of course, but piano again is one of the foundation instruments, and so especially with the little guys, you're going to have a lot of piano students that are going to have a lot of these kinds of qualities. So, as I mention these things, I'm also going to just talk about what I've done to, have any situation be successful for the student and for myself as we can make it. Ultimately, we want music to be a fun experience, enjoyable experience, and a learning experience for beginners. And with intermediates, of course, there's a little bit more of a desire to really have them grow musically and technically, that sort of thing. We still want to be fun, but of course, the more advanced the musician becomes, the more it becomes a question of, okay, so do you want to be a professional musician kind of thing, of course, but which means more practice, higher standards, all that stuff. So, all right. So first off, there are kids that just repeat and sit down to play, and they have tunnel vision, and they just repeat something over and over again. Or in a worst case scenario, they just repeat it once and they're done. Go all the way through from beginning to end. That might work with little guys, them just playing short pieces, but tends to not work out so well with longer pieces and more older students when they're playing longer, more involved pieces with more sections. Because obviously the length of the piece, vast majority of the time you're practicing a longer piece. You simply must work, as we know, you need to work short sections. Stop at that end of that short section, repeat, go back, but you don't immediately start playing again. You need to think about how you just played and all these little things. For horn, of course, it's a lot of embouchure things, a lot of things. Piano, it's fingering, and I'm talking mainly about piano here, so it is a matter of going through a weaker finger is playing a certain passage. It's a matter of getting that finger a little bit more assertive, perhaps. Every situation is a little different. The more advanced the player, the easier it is for that player to figure out for themselves what they need to do when they're practicing to correct a mistake. Of course, the younger the student, the less advanced the student, the less aware they are of how they're playing, the more that the teacher should come in to help them. And, of course, with beginners, it's a little easier to do this because the difficulty level is just easier, and so it's simpler music. It's easier to kind of here you go. But again, at the intermediate stage is a question of how detailed should you be. Certainly by the time that a student gets into their teenage years, I'm pushing in that area. I think it's definitely fine. Definitely a good idea to get a bit more detailed. Preteen years depends on intellectual qualities, but I think you still should err on depends on the student, depends on how advanced they are, but for most kids you want to probably err on not being too into it. Just again, it all depends. Not being too insistent on such a high level of play. But again, there are students that can handle that. So, but certainly by the teen years, it's definitely a good idea for the more serious student to get really, get more detailed, have higher expectations. So, the way in going back to just the student that keeps just repeating something from beginning to end without breaking it into little chunks, the way I tend to deal with those kind of situations is during the lesson to work on short sections and say, now, what I want you to do this week is how we were just working on the piece today. We just played four bars. We went back, talked about how they went. And we kind of reviewed a little bit, and then we played it again, and then we did the same thing. We thought about what happened, what we do to improve, all that stuff, and then we played it again. Maybe you didn't get to the point where it was 100%, but maybe you got really, really close, and then the next day, you try to get 100% on that section. And then maybe we didn't play the whole piece that day. And that's what you do. During the lesson, you help the younger student, which is probably preteen to teen age student that's working on longer pieces, generally speaking, to become more familiar with chunking or breaking up music into bit more manageable sections to practice. So, of course, students only work on the fun pieces that are assigned, and usually all depends on every student is a little different. But most teachers will probably assign outside of something theory related, outside of a technical exercise. I'm going to include etudes here because etudes, of course, is a little bit longer, more mid-school. But most students are probably working on anything from between 2 longer pieces, or etude or a solo piece, 2 up to 6. Pushing beyond 6, it would have to be a number of shorter pieces for a younger student that just wants to play a ton of pieces and they're very, very into the piano, that sort of thing. But 6 is getting pretty 6 or 7. It's getting pretty hard to get into all those different pieces consistently over the week. So I think the average is about 4, give or take, a piece. But for the more advanced students, they're working on harder pieces for sure. Eventually get to a point where it's an etude and a huge solo. So, of course. So, students that only sometimes work on fun pieces that they want to do, and they don't get to the pieces you assign that they, that they need to work on, but they don't practice it because they just don't enjoy it. There's a lot of different things you'll hear about this kind of situation. It's not as simple as, it's not as straightforward as some people would like to believe. Of course, if you're going to be a professional musician, very much so, you just need to work on what your teacher assigns. But most people aren't going to become that kind of musician, so they're not going to get to that level. So do you insist that every student, what do you do? Do you drop a student if they don't practice everything that you assign? Do you work with them, hear what they want to play, listen to what they want to play, focus more on that kind of music? It's a question of who you want to teach and how flexible you're willing to be. You can still help a student to grow musically. If a student is primarily working on music that they enjoy, you can still help them. They won't necessarily develop the quality to just work on something that they don't enjoy. So they probably won't be music majors. They probably won't be piano majors. They probably won't be music majors. And you should make it clear that they should understand that's not going to be as much of an option if that's a very strong trait in that student, if they're more in their pushing into their teens. As for kids, certainly for kids, man, by all means, I think teachers should be a little bit gentler with students in this regard, more empathetic. And my empathy, I have a lot of empathy for my students, and so that empathy I have works very well for kids, particularly the kids that aren't very not as assertive about what they want out of lessons. So, again, but how do you handle the students that only want to practice what they enjoy? It depends on you as a teacher. It depends on the student. It depends on, because the student should understand that in order to get to a certain level of playing, there's certain things that you have to work on, and you have to spend a certain amount of time on them over sometimes several years, or more, a dozen years, 3 or 4 hours a day, to get to really, really be able to play really well. Really well, concert level. So that one, it all depends. It's a harder one to just have a succinct answer. The teacher that only teaches piano majors, a college professor, is going to differ very vastly with your teacher that just will teach any student who's willing to put a little bit of time in a week, and they're very, very flexible. And both ways are okay, because what we're talking about is education, private instruction. And if education is indeed taking place, if improvement is taking place, then there you go. It's problem solved. But the question is, again, that student needs to understand there are certain things you have to work on to get to the next level. Maybe it's something that sinks in more in the teen years. But again, there's some teachers that think, well, if we're going to prepare as many people as possible to go as far as they want to go, then we need to stress this at a younger age. Yes and no. The question is, at what age do you start really insisting that they practice everything that they really ought to be practicing if they want to become more advanced players? Well, my opinion is it really is the teen years that they need to really, for most kids, it's really the teen years, because, of course you always think of exceptions, but this is my opinion, but teenagers tend to be a little bit better able to manage everything that is going on in that situation. And of course, there's lots of kids that are a lot of parents that are very put off by very demanding teachers. Teachers should definitely keep in mind how students differ, and this is surprisingly, this is something that often is lacking even in very advanced teachers. And most of this I've just heard, but I've also occasionally experienced this kind of thing. If you're in a college environment, you can definitely put the heat on your students, and you should. If you're not in a college environment, it really depends. So, okay, moving on. I know this is going to be a longer video, but students that guessing, right? I have a student who says he guesses when he's playing a 5-finger piece. It's very beginner level, and I'm like, I don't want you to guess. I want you to think about every note. Sometimes with little kids, and I have to keep this in mind, they're not always able to really explain verbally what it is that is really going on. And so, of course, we try to be as observant as we can be as teachers. What is guessing? Guessing is it just putting the blinders on and just kind of, is that guessing? Well, is there a spectrum? Is there a spectrum of thought between guessing and knowing for sure what the note is? At that point, the student gets to that point. Is there a progression there? Well, yes, there can be. We often think of will probably prefer to think of this as a student who is trying to think about the note, every note at some point when they're young, when they're starting out in piano. It takes a bit more mental thought to figure out the notes. We want to think about that level starting out, rather than the student that is not really sure, and not really truly not sure, even at 5-finger, very basic type music. It can be frustrating for the student to just never seems to put in the effort to work on flashcards or to review theory, basic notes on the staff, different positions, and they don't put the time in. Maybe they're a little bit younger, and so a lot of our lesson time is spent going over that with them, and we're not really sure how effective it is, or how much they're listening, or how much they're paying attention, or if they're thinking about candy or something. So it's for the guessing student who's more of a younger student, isn't able to really express what they're thinking very well. And you have to kind of you can either keep working with them, like the person who practices only fun pieces. You should try different approaches to learning notes. You can keep working with them or not. You can try giving to if you get too frustrated, you can give them to a different teacher. You can have them kind of. It all depends, but this is one of the things that can frustrate a lot of teachers, even more than the student only wants to practice fun pieces or the favorite pieces. It's true that some students they're not really able to even. Again, it's assessing a student's intellectual level. It's mostly how old they are, but it's mostly observation. It's mostly what can that student do. And there will be students that just don't work very hard at these things, and so it's hard, of course. Anyway, hopefully that helps with that kind of student. And again, what helps the most is just you keep reviewing these things. You keep trying to make it like second nature to them. Or you drop them. So, hyperactivity. This one, oh boy. There are all kinds of things that can help. Yes, mainly boys, but also girls that have hyperactivity issues. Sometimes it's psychological, sometimes they're something else. But if it's psychological, it's especially it's a much more noticeable situation. So piano is a forgiving instrument in certain respects regarding the level of focus that a student needs. My other instrument that I play, mainly horn, is far more demanding on focus, in my opinion, starting out especially. But even anyway, but of course piano at a sort of advanced level, it gets you need to have a student that's really focused. But it helps for hyperactive kids to do some physical exercise, maybe really quick for half a minute max or so, around that ballpark. Jumping jacks, just to get some restless energy out of them. This is a psychological area, and so I can only say what's worked in the past for me. Certainly psychologists would know oftentimes more than I would about things like, certainly about medicine and therapy kinds of things, but also even diet, nutrition, and sleep, and all these other things. Very stimuli. As often, what hooks the kids, what helps the kids stay focused that have attention troubles. Certainly, if something is enjoyable, visual, if you play music for them, if it's a higher energy kind of music, whatever it is, the more that the teacher gets into the methodical theory kind of approach, or gets into the turns into professor again. In some respects, it's just a lot of kids will tune that teacher right out, and so hyperactivity is also it's a tough thing. And what the more successful teachers in this area, I think, do, and I've done this somewhat, is to always be engaging the student, talking to them. Try this. Have you play and have them play, or you can play with them. Emphasize things like rhythm and where different notes are accented, like time signatures. It's more of a physical kind of thing. It's like dance. And if you try to not stress the theory and the analysis side of music, it tends to help out those kinds of kids a little better. Also, you know, uh, letting them have a little bit of time to just go berserk for a second. There are some kids that are going to be really, really difficult to handle, harder than any student I've actually ever taught. And so there were times when it's perfectly fine to say, I just am not really cut out to teach this sort of kid. And so, yeah, it happens. On a related note, this is different than the hyperactivity kind of thing, but it's, there are kids certainly that maybe are autistic a little bit, or similar situations. It goes without saying that certain situations for students will, mild Down syndrome, whatever it is, certain situations will definitely limit what they can do. And so the question is always what's reasonable to expect from the student. In fact, that's something across the board here. What is reasonable to expect from a certain kind of student? Your kid that has an IQ of 140 and he practices for 2 hours a day and he's only 10 or 11. Sure, it's very, very reasonable to expect him to be able to play Mozart's Sonatine in C. Like, it's back of it. It's just like nothing for him. So, or a lot of different Baroque classical pieces, Bach or something. That kind of kid it's going to be fun and great to teach. One thing, of course, you want to be careful about doing is it sort of has to do with just being aware of how old they are and just using generally a kinder tone. Keep in mind he's only 10. Kids are they're thinner skinned than adults, and so, but still keep your expectations very high. But that kind of student is going to be vastly different than the student who is just trying to make sure they can go from C thumb to G, and they're nervous that they're going to play the wrong note. And no, they're not dumb, but they're maybe just very timid or anxious or shy, or they're not always sure what they're supposed to do. You need to keep pointing to the music and make things as be as kind as you can be as simple as you can be, so on and so forth. So all kinds of different psychological conditions out there. Some kids will notice how you smell more than what you're saying. I mean, so ladies, try not to wear too much perfume. Okay, not just ladies. So. But maybe it's cologne for guys. Who knows? But so fatigue. This happens all the time. All the time. Fatigue is actually an easy one to manage. Typically, what I do is, try not to stress as much the exhausting, either intellectually or physically kinds of music. Spend some work on that, but see if we can work on more on maybe just have them take a break for a second and you just talk about some things related to what they're working on in the lesson, whether it's music history or something, or some general kinds of things, theory, musicality of a piece, mood. You give them a break for a bit, and then you have them come back to it, but maybe not work a whole lot more on a, like, say, more technical piece, and have them maybe work more on a more lyrical piece that is less technically demanding. But you can't go back and forth that way. Give them more breaks. That's the way to handle fatigue. Some students really are. I've had a few times when students are they're so tired that you kind of have to take over the lesson and do most of the playing yourself. I don't always enjoy those lessons, but they tend not to happen too much. Students, I think, even from the age of 8 on, most students really try to focus. They really try to. So it's something I haven't really I deal with often, but it's a question of how tired the student is, and the more tired the student is, the more you have to kind of, in order to keep things going, you have to kind of take charge a little bit sometimes. So but still keep in mind what, if the student really is very, very tired, they will probably not play a very rapid piece as well as they could if they were more alert. Of course, same thing with teachers, same thing with all of us. So. Frustration. Well, the best thing to do when a student gets really frustrated, whether it's a piece during the week, you want to make sure that you're not assigning too difficult of pieces, at least for beginner intermediates, that more advanced. The more advanced the student is, truly, the more you can give them the tough stuff. But I understand frustration will often happen. What you do is try to calm the student down as much as you can, and you just try to work on bite-sized chunks. It's a little bit like the repeat student, but it's a little bit more of a, instead of the student being a situation where they're just kind of pounding away at something and they're not frustrated, they're just kind of in this tunnel vision kind of thing. Instead of that, the student's just like, oh my gosh, it's so overwhelming, I can't do this. It's too hard, right? It's too hard. You say, wait, hold on. The way we can do this, but we have to start with little things, and we keep going bit by bit, and then we get better and better, and we keep going up the mountain, right? Little steps, right? So, I can do this. Okay, So, that's one way of handling frustration. It's better to have something along those lines, do something along those lines for the more intermediate level student or advanced student. For beginners, if a beginner is frustrated at something, it's really time to break it down, make it slower for them, the tempo. You want to explain whatever, understand first. Definitely want to ask them, well, what is really tough about this piece for you? And you say that, ask empathetically, of course. Make sure that you're not frustrated yourself. It's very easy to be that way. But so once you understand what is really what the students really, you don't even have to ask questions sometimes. Sometimes you just know, but occasionally, it helps to ask. And the student might say, oh, it's this. And you go, oh, okay. Well, so I'll just play the chord for him. I'll just play a passage for him. There you go. And you work with him a little bit. And so, a lot of times it's just a miscommunication with the teacher and the student. Or the student isn't communicating with the teacher what's really going on. The teacher is kind of going on their own pace and just leaving the student behind, and the student's even more frustrated. That happens all the time. So all the time. So you always, as a teacher, just always keep asking questions. Let the student. The student should always be able to say to the teacher what is really going on. Definitely. So frustration happens a lot. Boredom. Now, boredom there's that kind of correlation with the only practicing fun pieces or practicing a lot of dull pieces. So, boredom, well, the easier thing to do is to realize when, a student's just simply not going to play certain kinds of pieces. Something else you can do is try to explain something that maybe is a bit more tedious so that it becomes more interesting to the student. That sometimes works. You can have the student try to investigate something themselves. That really only works for very, very serious students or teen students. Try to make, but there are a lot of things that you can do to make something a bit more enjoyable. I think gimmicks are not very effective. Maybe for 7 or 8 year olds, but beginning, but not much beyond that. Sometimes, it's a question of is the student really going to want to be a piano major? They're going to want to. Are they really into classical piano or not? And if they're not really interested in classical music, maybe consider that maybe they want to join a band when they're older. Maybe they just want to enjoy playing movie themes. Maybe they want to pursue film music as a composer, or maybe they want to work for a radio station in the future, or be in music business, or jazz, of course. There's all kinds of things. And so at a certain point, especially maybe as a teacher, I notice if a student really truly does not have any interest in a certain area of music. I recognize also the fact that that student's probably, if that interest is not classical music or jazz, or in some respects movie themes, depending. Yeah, there's certain kinds of music where you just want to say, okay, maybe I'm not going to be the best teacher for you, or it's always a question of what the teacher is willing to do. How do you teach someone that's only interested in rap music or hip hop or funk? A little kid, you have maybe a little guy. He's only interested in jazz and funk, and a lot of that music is too advanced for him. Well, you started out with folk tunes and a lot of basic stuff like every other kid. But maybe at a certain point, you start adding more of the New Orleans classics, the classic jazz stuff, and then you just go from there. But yeah, I mean, it's a struggle. It can be to keep the student interested, and you want to keep the student interested in lessons. Otherwise, if the student's not interested, they're just kind of going through the motions, they're not going to grow as much. It's all about passion, and in our society, academia rewards classical musicians in a sense, or most musical programs are very classically oriented still, with jazz being kind of secondary of emphasis. And then after that, movie themes, or film music for composers, and maybe some the studio musician thing in LA and that sort of thing, and so on and so forth, and pop and everything else. But so a few thoughts there. The talkative and cheerful kids. Well, the easy thing to do is talk with them a little bit, and it's a question of at some point redirecting them back to the lesson. It's fine for even up to 5 minutes into a lesson for the really chatty student, I think, to if he or she has a story to tell you, by all means, just listen to the story. We're talking about beginners a lot of times here. We're not talking about your really serious teenager that just is really nervous about their audition for college. That situation, we're talking about more of the student that is more recreational about music. So it's a bad idea to cut a student off who's more sensitive or likes you, admires you. You don't want a student who's upset with you or that sort of thing. It's a really bad idea. You certainly don't want a parent who's ever upset with you. That's an extremely bad idea. In both cases, it's very bad. But it's better just to listen. And then when the students told their story, you respond a little bit, laugh a little bit, or whatever, and then you move on. That's better, generally better to do that, the younger students especially. The silly and goofy student, it's kind of along the same lines. It probably is a good idea to try to not be super serious with those folks all the time, or to limit your times when you're especially serious. Again, most of those students are not going to be music majors. The few that are they're probably more likely to be comics or going to drama, or they're going to go into some other area, not necessarily music performance. For those music performers that have that kind of quality about them, there's still folks that have have a lot of performers that have more of a lighthearted quality about them, but they tend to be the minority. The more you get to the professional level of music, majority professionals are extremely focused and more, I think, serious-minded. So, but still realize, you can tell a little joke. They can tell a little joke at certain points of lesson, not right in the middle of a tough piece they're working on, but maybe as a stopping point during the lesson. You can say, okay, so joke time. Try to be, don't want to be so formal about it, but if they're working really hard and you're having a good lesson, there's nothing wrong with that at a certain point. Just saying, just a little joke. When you get to the college level again, the more you approach the college level, I know it's generally not done as much. But again, just like with the talkative student, it's not always a good idea to cut off the student, unless you're talking about someone who's extremely serious student, or you're preparing for an audition, or something really big, or big performance or solo. So, but I mean, this you certainly don't want to be a bully as a teacher. So, you need to get through the rest of the stuff here. Sorry, I know this video is going a little bit longer than I thought it would, but there are students that have a preference for working on fewer pieces at a time and getting to a higher degree of mastery for those pieces. That's something that is more of a practice approach, teaching approach that is more for advanced and professional players that also would apply a lot of times to intermediate players. I've never had a problem with a student who's a younger student who wants to practice at that kind of approach. The only problem with that is that as a teacher, it depends on what you're teaching. I mean, it depends on what the student wants to learn. It depends on all kinds of things. If you have a student who's weaker in certain areas of musical reading, whether it's key signatures or different kinds of harmonies or the damper pedal, or it can be techniques or something theory related. It can be all any kinds of all kinds of things. If you have a student for half a year is working on just a few pieces, it's not always a good idea. And the way to kind of help a student the most who has that approach to practicing is you keep presenting material to them that they might want to play. And they will play those pieces, but maybe not with quite the same focus. They will play certain other pieces that they really want to play at a very high level. But at least if you keep having them sight read music, if you keep talking about the things that they need to work on still, it is definitely a lot better, a lot more effective than just having a student limited to only a very small number of pieces of music for a longer period of time. By the time a student gets to their later teens and certainly adult years in college and that sort of thing, it's fine, of course, for a student to spend a year on one huge piece, because the idea is before that point they'll have worked on hundreds of different pieces, thousands maybe even, in some cases. So, and that should provide a good musical foundation. You want a musical foundation. Every advanced and professional player should have a solid foundation of different pieces they've played in the past fairly well, or even extremely well. So it's the easier thing to manage, really. But these are some approaches I've taken. You have the fast fingers kids, and those kids. My approach has always been to let them play as fast as they want to play. But I keep telling them, okay, here we go. I have them practice, things like keeping a steady beat. Because that's usually one of the main things that a lot of these kids can't do as well. But they just want to play as fast as they can play. And so I'm a little bit more lenient than some teachers in this area. I think it's great to be able to, get those fingers going really, really rapidly. But you need to still stress the ability to keep a steady beat, an internal beat to those kids. Sometimes you need to stress that quite a bit. And there are times you need to actually just say, okay, hold, I know you have fast fingers. We got to put that on hold for a while. So, not the worst case scenario, but you got to emphasize that. You got to emphasize, sometimes you have to emphasize the rhythmic concepts for these kids. So, these kinds of kids. The slow and steady kids, the cautious, methodical kids that want to make sure every single note's right. And they're playing a little slower than they should. It's great to have those kinds of students, at least for me. And they tend to kind of go oftentimes hand in hand with either more sensitive kids or the more analytical kids. That sort of thing. But the challenge is to help them to be able to play something a little faster. And this is where use of metronome comes in handy. More in this case, I think, than the fast fingers kids, because in those kids, they just have to hear that beat. Or so whatever the tempo is. These slow and steady kids, though, it's scary, especially scary for them to play at certain speeds. It's kind of a whoa, I want to make sure all the notes are right. It's too fast for me. I can't. It's like the kid who I was the same way. I was very cautious, not only on the piano when I was younger, but I was very cautious as a skier. And so, how do you help them? Well, you have to be very, very slow with helping them get a little faster with using the metronome. You have to, say, okay, maybe it's only one click on the metronome, but only one click for the entire week. And maybe you only set a smaller range of progress from like quarter equals 60 to quarter equals 90, maybe even 80. Maybe it's not realistic for that student to play something at one quarter equals 120 yet, or certainly not quarter equals 140 for some pieces. It's just, and so sometimes it helps that student if they're a little bit more advanced, if they're a little bit more ready to play something a little faster. It helps for you to play something at that speed so they can actually hear how rapid certain notes are. And of course, it goes without saying, it's something extremely rapid or much more rapid for a shorter period of time. It's often much easier to play something like that more rhythmically correct than it's something that's a very extended passage. It maybe doesn't have as rapid of notes, but it just keeps going at that same tempo. I mean, if it's relentless, it can be very difficult to play very, very well. You have to work on those pieces quite a bit sometimes. Anyway, metronome. The metronome is that kind of student's best friend, but it can be frustrating, of course. So you have your memorizers, students that once they think that they know a piece, once they probably don't always know it as well as they think they do, then they'll want to memorize it. So they'll want to play it back from memory, no music. I often wish that that memorization wasn't pushed so fast on kids by many teachers. I often feel like memorization of a piece, it should only happen in the teen years, at the very earliest, the much more higher IQ kids and more advanced kids that are preteens or even younger. But that's a very small percentage of kids that are in that ballpark, very small. Memorization really shouldn't be expected from anybody younger than 12. It just, unless this kid is much more advanced than most kids their age, and they're ready for that kind of thing. And it should be a gradual thing. You shouldn't. You should allow a student, if they're trying to play something from memory, to go back to that piece and say, "Wait, hold on. This is how it goes." Oh, okay. Certainly for older teens or adult students, it's very understandable to want to. You need to be a professional who needs to play things from memory, of course. But again, it's something that. Anyway, so try to explain to students that have that tendency. You want to have them make sure they understand the piece fully, and so it's the question. The question is, when do you take away the music? Well, you don't. You want to tell that student, don't take away the music as when you think that you are ready to. Wait a bit longer. So that the students that, of course, a similar kind of student, just want a student who wants to play by ear, and maybe they have a hard time reading music. For that kind of student, you have to work on theory a lot with them. You have to encourage the intellectual quality of reading music. And so theory. Maybe in the past I didn't work as much with theory with these kids, but a lot of these kids, especially associated with the hyperactivity kind of thing, they don't have the patience to work on this on their own. So, but it's still in certain aspects, it could be that it might be more effective to teach note reading, but not necessarily just rote memorization, but having a kind of more of a aesthetic quality about harmonies, or making things into a game, that sort of thing. But for those play-by-ear kids, theory's got to be a huge priority, and sometimes there's only so much you can do. If you can help a student to read at least a decent level, late elementary to early intermediate, at least that level is better than beginner, because a lot of kids that just want to play by ear, if they don't have that expectation that they'll read better, the theory's going to be, they're just going to end up not reading music at all for the rest of their lives. So They have your fearless kids that will just play things with a bunch of mistakes. Sometimes not as many, sometimes more. And they're aggressive players, not just boys, but those kids. This is somewhat associated again with hyperactivity a little bit, but you know, just allow the aggressive players to play everything twice as loud as they should, and when they get to a certain age, then you can stress things a bit more like dynamics, with being a bit more accurate dynamics, roughly around 11 or 12 or 13, that ballpark. But you want to make sure that you're assigning a lot of loud music to those kids. Make sure that they're able to use their energy. You don't want to give them a bunch of stuffy little, hiding pieces, or slow and dainty. Those kids will just go crazy. Certainly, the kids that are hyperactive will definitely not have the patience for that kind of stuff. So, but it's fun to have those kids that are fearless and more aggressive players. Sometimes it can be a little bit of it can be very draining. Their kids love to play very from the Bastion series, the Indian songs, and just pound on the piano for hours and hours. That can be grating, but feels more. You should always feel more sorry for the parents. Anyway, but but you want to encourage the joy of music for all kids, and some kids, you gotta give them loud stuff, so they'll enjoy it. So also you have your theory kids as well, and for those kids that have more advanced intellectual qualities, they can read music faster than most kids their age, automatically that quality. You might think the faster fingers kids are the more advanced kids. Yeah, no, I don't know. It's if you have kids that can read at a higher level, they can just understand more immediately. Ideally, what you want is a kid that, of course, has the virtuosity that's much more advanced than other kids, and also the corresponding intellectual qualities that we can read more at once. And of course, that kind of kid is going to be amazing. You'd love to teach that kid, of course. But the theory kids are, you might have a strong interest in composition, but just enjoy the times when you have kids that are like that, whether or not they have the desire to play faster or more difficult music. Not a problem. It's always more enjoyable. You can always talk more about harmonies, that sort of thing. Of course, with those kids, they'll listen. They often will time. If they have a higher IQ, they'll have longer attention spans. It works out great. You have your pop star kids. If you have pop star kids, make sure that you're aware of their interests. Assign them some pop music. Why not? Same, classical kids. That's what we all are trained to teach classical kids. No complaints there, at least in the traditional sense. But movie theme kids, kind of ditto for pop. Just make sure that they're working on some pieces here and there that are movie themes. Same thing with jazz and other things. Some trends among boys opposed. Boys, of course, will definitely enjoy adventure type movie themes, exciting kinds of things. Sometimes, there are girls that enjoy that kind of stuff too, but boys really seem to go for Star Wars, particular sci-fi, anything with weapons, lasers, that sort of thing. So it's a good idea to keep that in mind for many boys. And so, there's the aggressive factor for some music. For girls, of course, I noticed I've assigned a lot of Disney music for girls. Girls just seem to love Disney music. The newer stuff, the older stuff, anything that's cutesy and funny, and also a lot of pretty music, a lot of more expressive music that I've assigned students have gone to girls. They love that stuff. Of course, I don't know, it's pretty flowers kind of thing. It's, very much, I love that stuff. So, You have students that are also kind of followers of teachers. I'm not sure, to be more specific, I mean, there are students that will mimic teachers. So they want to please their teachers. And by pleasing, I mean they'll learn what to say and do to make sure that they have at least a tolerable lesson, that they'll be okay, kind of thing. The teacher didn't yell at me. Lesson, mission accomplished. Yeah, that kind of thing. And more. It tends to happen with either students that are more passive or have shyer personalities, or students that are doing what they're doing because their parents are really into it and they're just trying to please people. And there are obviously some very real issues with this. It's extremely important to be. Actually, it's vital. It's one of the first things that I can think of that would go into how successful lessons have been for a student. If you have to have the student and the teacher on the same, they have to be communicating. They have to be on the same page. They have to, you have to have a student and teacher on the same page. If you can't have a teacher who is in the dark, really, with the student, and thinking a student's here, but they're not. And because the student is just going to, oftentimes, many cases, try to avoid any confrontations with the teacher. So they'll try to just please them. They'll try to guess. They'll try to, they might do very, very well in the pieces, but, it's like the student who crams for a test, or the student who just goes through the motions, and they do okay, hopefully, and then they forget all that stuff that they just learned because they're trying to please the teacher. They're trying to please their parents. They weren't doing what they're doing for themselves, for real learning. And so that's a real problem. You would think that at some point, for more intelligent students, younger kids and teens, well, this is more of a kid type of thing. You'd think at some point the kids would really would learn, and perhaps they do. But there's for some teachers, there's such a peculiar way that they might go about teaching lessons, or they go such a fast pace that the students are just trying to keep up with the teacher. They're just doing their best to try to keep up. They might not be in a state of mind where they're always aware of what they know. They'll just shift instead to these shortcuts and things that they've learned to try to manage a lesson, having a lesson that's okay. This is actually very commonplace. It's something that happens all the time, not just with younger students in some respects. And so I think teachers should just be aware that, it's scary when you're taking lessons. It's scary to have a teacher who might be upset with you. So the teacher should be aware of, the student is trying to avoid a conflict but I'm not really maybe fully aware of everything that's going on. I need to not be, it's always better to be understanding of a situation and to help a student to progress as much as you can, to teach. It's always better to go that route. To be firm at times, but if you smack a student down, ever, and you do that when the student just tries not using all the little devices to try to keep lessons flowing smoothly, if that kind of teacher ever that happens, the student can lose kind of a sense of trust in a teacher that is like, well, I guess lessons are only really working out when I am just kind of using these little shortcuts. I know I'm going on about this a little bit, but this is real stuff that happens during music lessons, and there are ways to solve this, and they do have nothing to do. The way to solve this has nothing to do with a teacher sticking to their guns. It has everything to do with understanding where every single student is really at, and then going from there and just trying to help them improve. Yeah. So you have kids that enjoy playing different kinds of rhythms more. Um, you have kids that enjoy different kinds of harmonies more, and you have your more expressive and sensitive kids, and you have all kinds of different kids. But some of this, as I talk about this other stuff, it definitely, of course, applies to teens as well. Teenagers should, both kids and teens, but especially teenagers, are often very busy. They really are. So it becomes important for the teacher to help a student with their schedule sometimes, helping them to kind of see when they can get in some practicing. Sometimes, every situation is a little different. Don't always just say, hey, if the Japanese or the Korean kid, he's doing all this stuff and he can still be able to get in half hour to an hour of practicing every day. How is it that no, you shouldn't go that route. It's very tempting to do that. What's better to do is say, well, what do you want to do every day? Make a list and tell us to make a list and say, well, where are piano lessons? And if piano lessons aren't high enough, if they're not in the top 5 or 7, or it depends on what a student actually has to do. But if they're very low on the list, that's probably a good reason to maybe either drop the student or have the student take a break from lessons for a while. It just depends on how many things they're doing every day. But if the student's doing 20 different things, 20 different actual things, 20, I mean, feel bad for the student. I'd not feel bad. Tell the parents, oh my gosh, this kid is he's doing karate, he's doing piano, he's doing dance lessons, or he's doing 7 different classes in the course in school. And then he's got, Boy Scouts, and he's got, playing with friends, and he's got his hobbies and Legos, of course, and things, and he's got video games, and it's recreational, and he's got sports, and he's got and these are all good things, but we need to pick and choose some of these things. Swimming lessons, and just keep going here. So, all right, I know I touched on a lot of bases here, and this is approaching an hour. So hopefully this is going to help some of those teachers out there that are at their wits' end. You guys feel free to ask me any questions that you want to ask. And I've been teaching for a while now, and has definitely had some successes with all kinds of students. So I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks. Bye.